Oh, okay. Very good. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be with you again. Last Friday, we looked at the Greek ruler Antiochus Epiphanes. And perhaps some of you remember that the name Epiphanes, which is a Greek word, means God manifest. And we noted how the same word is used on the Feast of the Epiphany at Christmas to denote Jesus manifesting himself as the true God. First before the shepherds, who represent the Jews, and then before the wise men, who represent the Gentile or pagan nations. But before Jesus, the true God, came among us, as Antiochus shows us, ancient rulers often declare themselves to be God in the flesh, God manifest. Alexander the Great had done the same. The one we heard that had conquered the world from the Persians, made his own Greek empire, the largest empire at that time that anybody had ever known. And he did it all before he was 33, and he died when he was 33. But he also saw himself as a son of the gods. I found out this week that Alexander was taught by Aristotle as a boy. It was then that he imbibed all the Greek wisdom, the human wisdom we've been talking about, and was inspired to give the whole world the wisdom of Aristotle and Plato and all the literature and the ideas and the technological knowledge of that time, all very useful. He wanted to unite the world, his empire, around these ideas. But he called himself God. The Roman emperor, during the time of Christ, Caesar Augustus, also called himself the divine. And why did they do this? They did it to exalt their prestige in the eyes of the people, to increase the fear of the people in their eyes, so that their rule would be obeyed, make it a lot easier to rule when you call yourself God. The army doesn't have to do so much work. However, oppressive rulers, we know from our own time, from Hitler and Stalin and all these people of our own time, it'll only succeed so far, and is usually short-lived. And we saw this last time with the decision of Antiochus Epiphanes IV to ban the Jewish way of life, because it was in conflict with the Greek way of life that he, as a true son of Alexander, was promoting. And this was his big mistake. He thought that because many of the high-ranking Jews that were living in Jerusalem at that time had conformed to the Greek way of life and were going along to the gymnasium and adopting Greek dress and hairstyles and generally imbibing Greek culture and ideas and living that way and ceasing to practice as Jews, that all the Jews would accept his laws banning the Jewish way of life, and so bring about, as he wanted, the unity of everyone in his empire. Unity of thought, unity of politics, unity of rule. To bring about this unity with everybody worshipping Zeus rather than Yahweh. And that was why he desecrated the temple by installing an altar to Zeus in the temple of Yahweh. And that's called the abomination of desolation. And he wanted his empire to be strong against the new coming force, which was getting stronger and stronger all the time, the force of Rome. And in doing this, in making this mistake, Antiochus reckoned without considering the views of all those who lived not in Jerusalem or in the towns, who tended to be more cosmopolitan, more open to new ideas, wanting to live by them, but the Jews who lived in the countryside, the rural people who were more conservative, the villages, because it was from here, the rural areas, that the Maccabees, books that we're looking at now, in their revolt against Greek oppression, got their support from the countryside, not from the towns, generally speaking. And it all began when Mattathias, a country priest, Jewish priest, began a war to restore Jewish laws and practices and overturn Antiochus's oppression. And the groups he gathered around him were totally devoted to the law of God and were prepared to die for it. There's a lot of martyrdoms in the book of Maccabees. Think about the story, which we have in the liturgy quite often, of the mother with her 7 sons, who were all martyred at this time because they will not eat the flesh of pigs, swine. One after the other, the 7 sons are butchered, and then finally the mother herself. And she exhorts them on to courage in the face of this persecution, to give their lives. And it's the first time in the Bible when there is a clear exposition of belief in the immortality of the soul. It had been coming in the wisdom literatures we've seen, like in the book of Wisdom, but this was, you could say, a living out of that teaching by Jews of that time. This belief in the immortality of the soul, that even if these 7 sons die, the mother is quite convinced that they will rise again and their just cause will be recognized by God. So that's a very important section of the second book of Maccabees. And one of the real reasons why these books are included in the Catholic canon of scriptures. In the Protestant Bibles, they're in the apocryphal section of their Bibles. They're there, but they're not seen as inspired. The church holds to the inspiration by the Holy Spirit of these books because of what they teach and the loyalty to the law of God that they expound to us. So these people were completely devoted to God's law and prepared to die for it. These are also the ancestors of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that we hear about in the Gospels, who would also be equally devoted to the law, and why they persecuted Jesus. But they were devoted in the law in the wrong way, in that they ignored the more important spirit behind the law, which of course is love. they had become hardened in their devotion to the law, so that they ceased to be really keeping it, because they were putting the law before God, almost putting the law before love, the spirit of love. But at this time, they're full of fervor for the law, and no doubt Jesus would have commended them for what they did if he'd been among them. Because the Maccabees were fighting not over points of the law, like the Pharisees saying to Jesus, why are you eating on the Sabbath, or why are you healing on the Sabbath, and all this sort of thing, as their descendants would do, but for the very existence of the law in its integrity itself, and the possibility of living by the law was being denied them, and so they had to rebel. The thing that triggered the rebellion was the devastating massacre of 1,000 Jews by Antiochus for refusing to take up arms to fight on the Sabbath day. They said, we are going to obey the third commandment and not fight on the Sabbath day, so we will not cooperate. And the penalty was that they were massacred. So this was the spark which caused the Maccabees to fight. The war was led initially by Mattathias, and then it went on for a number of years, and then by his third son, Judas, that's when the word Maccabeus came in, or Maccabees came in, because he was called Maccabeus, Judas Maccabeus. There's a famous piece of classical music about him, I think by Handel, which means hammer. So he hammered the Greek rulers. And under him, the war changed from just a local rebellion, really, under Mattathias. It became a full-scale conflict against government forces, which Judas defeated over time in a number of battles, important battles that are recounted in the books of Maccabees. And the aim was, which he succeeded finally in doing, was to occupy Mount Zion in the center of Jerusalem, where the temple stood, as you know, where Solomon had built his temple. Just recall, it's been destroyed by the Assyrians, then people went into exile, and then under Ezra and Nehemiah, Jews came back and rebuilt the temple. It's this second temple that Judas reoccupies now. After its desecration, as we've said, by Antiochus' altar to Zeus, that altar was smashed and it was rededicated with a new altar to the true God, Yahweh. And this happened in November to December 164 BC. So just over 100 years before Jesus is born, this is. And the day of its rededication is remembered annually by Jews to this day. And it's called the Feast of Hanukkah. And they keep that feast round about the time that we keep Christmas. But it just, and Hanukkah just means dedication, rededication of the temple. They recall that and celebrate it every year by Judas Maccabeus. The very same year, Antiochus Epiphanes IV died. His young son, Antiochus V, succeeded him, but he was so young that he needed a regent to rule for him. And the regent, who was called Lysias, I think he was called, abrogated all the anti-Jewish laws that Antiochus had passed, and Jewish freedom was restored. But initially, at first, only religiously. Their religious laws, they were free to observe their religion again. Politically, the Seleucids, this Greek dynasty that had been ruling for a number of years now, still ruled the Promised Land. The Jews still paid taxes to them, and a Greek garrison remained in Jerusalem to police the state of the Greeks. Now the Maccabees set about getting political freedom as well. And because the Seleucids, the ruling family, the Greek families, were getting divided and a lot of infighting happening between themselves, they were becoming weaker in power. And the Maccabees exploited this weakness, played one Greek family, one Seleucid family off against another, supporting one and then supporting the other, until finally full independence, political independence and freedom from taxation was given them about 20 years in 1845 BC, 145 BC, when descendants of Mattathias, Simon Maccabeus, was recognized as high priest by the Seleucids. Now, the two books of Maccabees give you a sober and reliable account of everything that I've been telling you about. I've given you the bare bones of the plots, as it were. What you need to do is to look at the books and just get a feel of the time and a feel of what they're saying. Look up significant passages if you can. The account of the woman that's in Second Maccabees. I'll give you the reference, I think. There's a whole series of yes, here we are. 2 Maccabees 7 is a very moving account of this mother with her 7 sons. And in my Bible, it says one of the best known passages from the book of Maccabees is this account of the martyrdom of a mother and her 7 sons. The willingness to sacrifice one's life rather than transgress the law and commandments is a frequent theme in Maccabees. Despite torture, the entire family remained faithful and ordered the supreme sacrifice of their love and fidelity. And they say, as they're being martyred, we have died for his laws. It says here, abiding in the truth as expressed by obedience to God's law often requires considerable sacrifice of comfort, popularity, and even life itself. And so many people have borne witness to that during the history of Christianity and the history of Judaism. Look at Nazi Germany, just for one example, and just thinking of the Christian martyrs, all dying to be loyal to God and his laws, and not sacrificing to foreign gods, to idols. The ultimate witness to the truth is martyrdom, which is the most convincing argument that God is the absolute good. There's nothing better than God, and he is worth dying for, even if you have to give up everything. Giving up everything for God, you gain God and you gain everything then. So it's worth being martyred. So, and we need to remind ourselves that, who knows, the church may be under a lot of persecution. It's already under a lot of persecution in many parts of the world. Of all the religious people, religious groups that are being persecuted at present, as you know, in your own country, if any are coming to us from India and Pakistan, those countries are experiencing.
Hello? Yeah.
So this is nothing new. What we're reading about in Maccabees is nothing, and very, very relevant to our own times. And I would say it's going to become more and more relevant in the next, in the immediate future, as our position is seen as more and more at variance with what society holds. We think about the LGBT agenda, the transgenderism, and all these moral issues, the moral issue of abortion, which has been with us for so long. These areas are increasingly seen as that Christians are not, or if you're true to Christianity, you can't support these positions. And therefore, the time is going to come quite soon when we will be persecuted for these things. So we need to read the book of Maccabees to inspire us and to give us strength of the Holy Spirit in the times that we live as well. There's nothing new under the sun. As they were persecuted in the past, we will be persecuted too in our own time. So we need to be ready for the time when we have to, or maybe have to, give our own witness. God bless you. The next time we're going to look at the coming of Rome. So after Greece, coming of the Romans, and we'll look at that next time. God bless. Bye for now.
Thank you, Father John. That was wonderful. You know, the story of